excuse the world's tiniest man bun while I explain Rule 8 of Federal Civil Procedure to myself and also to you, perchance. Okay, you can't just say perchance. Anyways, so we start with 8A, right? Which lays out what a complaint needs to have. Now, you need to have all three of these elements in order to have a complaint. If you do not have all three elements, then you have failure to state a claim, which results in a 12B6 motion, or I guess a 12B6, yeah, that's right, a 12B6 motion, and then eventually, right, as a result of that 12B6 motion, you end up with a motion to dismiss, and you're tossed out, right? With prejudice or without prejudice, it depends on how the judge is feeling. Kidding, it's not dependent on that, so don't think that, right? So in order to have a complete complaint, you need a short and plain statement of the grounds for the court's jurisdiction. Why this court? Why should we care? Tell us, right? So that's one. Let's say you have that checked off, okay? You tell them why. The second thing that you need is a short and plain statement of the claim showing that the pleader is entitled to relief. Now, that claim needs to be specific enough that the defendants can pull out why exactly they are being sued. If they can't, right? If they're like, what are you saying? This is too ambiguous. This is too general, right? They file a 12E. What's a 12E, Caroline? Well, I'm so glad you asked. 12E is a motion asking for a more definite statement, right? So they're saying, tell me more so I can address your claims. Cool. So let's say now that you have the statement of the grounds for the court's jurisdiction, as well as the statement for the claim showing that the pleader is entitled to relief. You have those two things. The last and final thing that you need in your complaint under 8A is demand for relief sought. What do you want for compensation? Do you want an injunction? Do you want $10 million? You got to tell them. You don't tell them, they don't know. I don't know. Right. A note on 8A2, right? The claim for, the statement of the claim showing the pleader is entitled to relief. That has a little more complication since Iqbar and Twombly overruled Conley. Conley, right, was based on a middle ground of facts. So, in Conley, when we used Conley as the standard, which theoretically we still do, right? If you put too many facts that are too definite, you are putting down conclusory statements, which means that you kind of just knocked yourself out of the realm of possibility there, right? You're saying, this is the thing, this thing is the way it is because I say it's the way it is. You can't have that, right? That's not the point of going to adjudication. You're supposed to hear both sides, right? So ever since Conley got overruled, it got overruled by two cases, well, mainly one called Twombly. Now in Twombly, they were like, here are all these factors. Do they seem plausible? Is it plausible that when we put them together that this is the actual result? That if we have all these facts that are the statement of the claim, does it show that the pleader is entitled to relief? Yes or no, right? So now the courts have sort of been moving to this interesting understanding of plausibility pleading, right? So Iqbar Twombly has this plausibility factor to it. So that's something to keep in mind about 8A2. Right. So now that we've gone through 8A really briefly, let's talk about 8B, which is our choices for denial. Right? If you get sued and you're reading this complaint and they're like, Caroline's favorite color is red. And you're like, no, that's not true. It's green. You have to deny that. Right? You got to go one by one. Right? So here are our options. So in 8B1, to make a denial, right, to address the claims, you need to have an 8B1, which means you need to state in short and plain terms the defenses to each claim asserted, and you need to admit and deny all allegations in the complaint. If you do not, we'll get to 8B6, But if you do not, right, either admit or deny, depending on whether it's responsive pleading or general pleading, you might end up admitting to things you didn't want to or having things denied that you didn't want to be denied. Okay? So that's important to note, is that 8B6 will kick in if you do not comply with 8B1. Right? Right. So, instead of responding to procedural law, right, like Rule 12, we're now replying to substantive law. So under 8B, you are replying to substantive law. Those denials are responding substantively. So there's 8B2. That's a general denial. You're saying it's in good faith. You deny the whole allegation. You say, I don't know anything about that. That's not true. I deny that that is a claim that they could put out for relief. I don't know anything about that. 8B2. Okay? You have a specific denial. 8B3. Right? You're saying, okay, all of this is true except this one thing. So Caroline wears sneakers and a red hoodie every time she studies Civ Pro. Well, that's not completely true, right? Sometimes I wear my green hoodie because that's my favorite color, right? So that would become a specific denial where you're denying part of the claim but admitting the rest. So yes, I do wear sneakers and I wear a hoodie, but it's not red, it's green. Specific denial, 8B3. 8B4 is a partial denial, right? So you're only denying one part and admitting what is true. So this is different from a specific denial, as in the bucket is wider, right? So instead of being Caroline wears a red hoodie and sneakers, it's Caroline wears clothes and earrings, right? So yeah, I'm going to wear clothes when I study for Civ Pro, but I'm not always going to wear my earrings. That's kind of a pain in the ass, so I'm not going to do that. Partial denial. You're denying only part and admitting the rest. It's a little less specific, right, than the specific denial in 8B3. I also apologize for my language. Is this still recording when this turns off? Oh, it is. Fire. I can't edit that out, so I guess we're just going to go with it. Okay, anyways, the next thing that we were looking at, right, we've talked about 8B2, the general denial, 8B3, the specific denial, 8B4, the partial denial, 8B5 is special, right? 8B5 is the lacking information and knowledge sufficient to form a belief about the allegation, right? So if someone who I don't know sued me for some reason about studying Civ Pro, right? If they sued me for some reason and they were like, this is what Caroline does when she studies for Civ Pro. And it's like, I open this complaint and I look at it and I go, who are you? Who are you? I don't know who you are. Huh? When I'm responding to that complaint, I can now cite 8B5. Lacking information sufficient to form a belief about the truth of an allegation. How would they know that? They don't know me. They don't know me. They don't even know if I study Civ Pro. Somehow they do. But that's, neither here nor there. So, those are the kinds of denials that you can make when responding to a complaint. You as in the general audience. Okay? Now, what about failure to deny a claim? That's that 8B6 we were talking about, right? Failure to deny a claim. Well, if we are in responsive pleading, right? Meaning that me, the defendant, is the one taking on the responsibility for communicating my denials and admittances, right? If we are in responsive pleading, then failure to deny a claim in that complaint turns into an admittance, right? So I could, let's say, deny 7 or 8 claims on paper, but then forget the 8th. Because I've forgotten the 8th, that now becomes an admittance. That is only if you are in responsive pleading. If you are not in responsive pleading, right? If you're not in responsive pleading, then anything you don't address becomes a denial. So when you're not in responsive pleading, okay, are you following? Not in responsive pleading, you are choosing which things to address when you put your answer in. Okay? So if we have 8 claims and I only reply to 2 of the 8 claims, those are the 2 claims that I'm admitting to. Right? The rest, because of the fact that I have not responded to them, are denials. So that's really important to keep in mind when we're talking about Rule 8b and also factoring in responsive pleading. I will cover affirmative defenses tomorrow because I am exhausted.